Kintsugi Heroes brings you the following River Murray flood recovery story, jointly funded by the Commonwealth and South Australian governments under the Disaster Recovery Funding Arrangements. To find out more about this podcast, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au. The 2022 River Murray floods in South Australia were caused by record water inflows from the Murray-Darling Basin due to heavy upstream rainfall. The slowly rising floodwaters inundated homes, businesses and farmland, causing widespread displacement, infrastructure damage and agricultural losses. The disaster significantly impacted local economies, communities and led to the region's long-term recovery. In this special limited series of Kintsugi Heroes, John Millam sits down with members of the Riverlands community and gives them space to share their experiences of their personal adversity and community resilience. It's only through connection and empathy that there can be a path to recovery. In this episode, John Millam is joined by Ivan Smith. A local by birth, Ivan spent decades as a motor mechanic before shifting his focus to radio communications. In 2022, when the Riverland floods hit, Ivan used his expertise to help the community stay connected. He worked to set up independent communication networks for the emergency services and the public, ensuring they could manage the crisis effectively. His proactive approach and personal assistance to his neighbours, combined with his deep community roots, provided critical support during a challenging time. Join us as Ivan shares his journey of innovation and resilience.
So, Kintsugi Heroes, fans, friends and listeners, welcome back to another Kintsugi Heroes podcast. And today we are once again following the stories of the floods in the Riverland area. Today we're talking to a man who has an interesting side of the story, because one of the things we know from talking to people who have gone through, flooding and fires and things, is one of the things that happens is people are caught by surprise by the impact of not having communication, not hearing stories, not being able to confirm how people are, contact the authorities, etc. And today our guest was ahead of the game on that and was actually assisting the emergency services to set up something that would mitigate that. Ivan Smith, welcome to Kintsugi Heroes Beyond the Deluge. So.
Good afternoon, John.
And mate, you're a local. You mentioned many decades. How did you end up in the Riverland area, and what's your backstory?
Born and bred in Renmark. Never ever left here, and done my apprenticeship as a motor mechanic, and then set up my own business and been self-employed for the last 45 years until I retired.
So you started out fixing all the locals' cars, right? So, but that's not where you ended up, right? How? Tell us a little bit about where you made a change, right? That it became significant for the area.
Yeah, well, my hobby had always been radio communications and electronics and what have you. So I studied. Once I became a qualified mechanic, I studied electronics and I slowly moved into that field because I identified at a young age that I won't want to be lifting heavy gearboxes over my head all the time. So I wanted to head somewhere a bit easier.
Yeah, it was like my dad was a mechanic, and I realised that my fingernails couldn't go through what his looked like, right? So, I think that was the soft bit of me. But, and so a country boy, your family had moved to Renmark. Were you a riverman? Are you a waterman?
Yeah. My grandfather and my father were woodcutters. Grandfather used to cut wood along the riverbank and put it in heaps for back in the paddle boat era, and the boats would come along and pick up the wood for their boilers and continue on. So my history is in Renmark from a way back.
Wow. and everyone seems to have some some part of their story is woven around the river in this area. Like, well, Renmark's an island, so I guess that's part of the story. So the floods in 2022. Now you were actually operating in. You talked about electronics, but you were in communication, in network, weren't you?
Yes, I'd left the mechanical game many years before that, and got serious into the communications field, and ended up working on the government radio network, which is utilised by a lot of all of the emergency services in South Australia.
So that's the UHF network. That's the one that connects people, on the bands, right, when they need to talk, the fireys and, services and so on.
Yeah, not the general public, just like the police and fireys, AMBOs, State Emergency Service, Country Fire Service, that type of communications.
And when you say worked on it, was what was involved in, what's involved in sort of getting a network out? Because this country is a tough place to link people up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big place, and I actually worked a lot for the State Emergency Service, who I also volunteered for, and I travelled around the state because they had the first series of radios put in. I then had to travel around the state and remove all of them and fit the next series of radios into every station around the state. So very interesting job, and just makes you realise how remote we are and how necessary it is to have the network working properly. So
fab, that's amazing. So 2022, your particular property, you were telling me that you felt confident, like when you got, had the noise that a flood was coming, which was sort of, there was a bit of pre-warning, right? So you were confident that you personally were going to be all okay. Why was that?
Yeah, I live out of Renmark Township. I'm about 4 kilometres out and a little bit higher ground. So it was the 1956 flood didn't get anywhere near it. So I was reasonably confident that I'd be okay, which allowed me to focus my thoughts and what I'd learned in emergency services and whatever. I could focus on where I could see maybe issues coming up and then act on them.
With that level of sort of oversight, did you see, and the town well, obviously, did you see where the problems would be? Were you looking and saying, oh, that person's going to have going to have an issue with the flood? And was it that obvious, really?
Yeah, because, well, it was to me. A lot of people it wouldn't have been, but because I wasn't worrying about my property, it allowed me time to focus on others and just sit back and watch others. And that's something we learned out of the, like when I was in the Metro Fire Service and the training we had there, you tend to look at things like that. And I was able to sit back and see some people that lived on that outside of the flood bank, like the unprotected areas. You could see they were going to have issues, and some of them were friends and that. So I was able to go and help them prepare their places, and more importantly, offer them moral support and just be there to listen for them. So, but I could also see when I come into town each time across the river flats, all the power lines run out of a substation that head into the town to feed the town power. And I thought, well, if one of those poles fall over, they can't get out there and stand it up again. We'll be without power. And that's what got me thinking about communications, because they'll be the first thing that fails, the telephone networks and everything. So I come up with a bit of a plan to present to council and see what they thought about it.
I love that. I love that idea, mate. You're looking there, and you don't look across the place, and from your background, you've gone, oh, I can see, one of the poles fall over, we're going to be in trouble. It's not something I would have picked up. I love that you picked it up, and then you took that plan and were proactive enough to take it into the. How was that received? Like, did people recognise it? Because I've often, from asking other people in other places, or dealing with other emergencies, they're often surprised by the lack of service that they, when they're cut off from power, or communications. They're often surprised by the impact of that. Because if power goes down now, there's nothing. There's no internet, there's no computers or telephones or radio.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what happens, and then it becomes very difficult to manage an event then.
Yeah.
So I sat down and wrote up a bit of a proposal, come and seen the CEO of the council and told him what I had in mind and what I thought could happen. But I also come with what I considered to be a solution to the problem that I'd prepared. And I said, look, I think this could happen, but I think this is how we can fix it. And he took that straight on board and organised. He then wanted me to do that same presentation. They had already formed a flood emergency management committee group of key people. So I come along and done a presentation to them, which was very well received. I think there was a few surprised looks around the conference table for a little while, and they looked at it, took on board what I said, and then we implemented 2 different systems that were all completely standalone. I solar powered them. I didn't want to rely on any third-party infrastructure, so everything was done that wouldn't be affected by the loss of power network.
Wow. And that's how it proved, wasn't it? Right.
Yeah, and that's what I've done. Luckily, we never got to use the system because the power poles didn't fall over, but certainly the potential was there. But it worked really well. I put 2 systems in. The general public can have UHF CB radios or citizen bands radios. So we put in a system for that, which would allow the council key people to talk to many of the locals that have CBs in their cars and whatever. But I also put in another private network, which the key people in council could then use that as their management tool to organise everybody that they needed to. The CB system, all the contractors that were here preparing the flood banks of that all had CBs in their trucks. So it just opened up a huge, big network that would allow management ahead of the whole system going down. And it was really great. One of the local businessmen here that's been here for many years, he's got a nice big tower on his property up on the high country. So went and seen him and told him about the proposal. He said, go for your life, use the tower. And so it all come together with some community involvement. So it was good. And the private network I built was, I'd previously built that for we've got a thing up here called the Riverland Dinghy Club where we race boats around creeks and what have you. And I'd built them a radio network to manage that event. And I went to the committee of the Dinghy Club and said, look, this is what I proposed to council. We want to pinch all your radios. And so that gave us a huge resource of radios. In the end, I'd set up over 50 portable handheld radios that the council could use had we needed. So it all come together pretty good.
I love that proactivity and can do. Terrific story. And it it's been noted. I've seen it's been a lesson from other events where people have had after the event they've gone and said we need to implement a sort of a CB solution or UHF solution. So with base stations and things. So you're way ahead of the game. Well done. I'm interested because you were just a young bloke in 56. What was the story? Was there a lore, like a sort of story, a myth around 1956, and people who knew what had happened then? Did they have a different attitude to other people who had no idea about what it was like to be in flood?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of that. The older generation that seen the flood. I was only about a bit over 3 when that hit. I can vaguely remember some of the big machinery in that building the flood banks, and because we used a lot of little grey Fergie tractors here because they were small enough to build the banks and whatever. So there was a huge lot of input from that age person that was involved in it back then. And then, of course, we had a lot of opinion from younger ones that had not seen a big flood too. So it was pretty interesting. That would have been quite a thing for the council to have to deal with.
Yeah,
Luckily, I wasn't in on that management part of it.
Well, they listened to you. Did obviously, and the banks were a success in Renmark at least, right? So, they must have listened to some of the wisdom that was out there. How did you think it all went? Right, it was a pretty challenging scenario. Could have been a lot worse.
Oh, we could have lost the town quite easily, and I personally think the council handled it very well. They become very proactive early in the piece, before the flood got here. And I think probably the problem we've got with the flood banks, when they were built back in 1956, a lot of them are still there. And they went back then, they just built them where, well, we need to put a flood bank straight through Joe Blow's private property. So that has been a major issue ever since about, who's responsible for the flood banks, and there's lots of went on there about that. And but very early in the piece, Grant Stevens, police superintendent, boss, he declared it an emergency, which then gives council different rights that what they can do, which then allowed them to go and fix the flood banks. And because a lot of the flood banks had sections of them pushed out and pushed over.
Right.
And,
a lot of good fill for a garden there.
Yeah, it's all play. But we'd had some instances of really big rains, and because we got flood banks around the town, when we had the big rains out the fruit block areas, they held the water in the fruit blocks. So I can remember people out in their tinnies going up and down their blocks standing in their tinnies picking the apricots. And what happened back then, people thought, well, I've got to save my block, save all the trees. They just pushed the flood bank out the way. So with the council being very proactive and given the rights to be able to just go through and fix the flood banks, it all come together extremely well. They engaged the right people, engaged an engineer, and had really solid plans on how to, fix this they went around and surveyed the entire flood bank network, 34 kilometres or something of flood banks here. Went around and surveyed them all, so they knew with the water coming up, we needed to go and put 300 mil of dirt on that one, and this one over here would be all right. So, no, they done a really good job protecting the town for sure. And, I thought, well, it's everybody's responsibility to put in and try and help a little bit if they can, if they're in a position to. And that's why I thought the town had been very good to me. I've had my business here, and it's really good to be able to give something back to the town, something positive. So,
oh yeah, it's a great idea. I'm interested because you talked about your friends being impacted, and one of your roles, you were going to support, get the place ready, but one of your roles was just encouraging, maybe just just being there as moral support or emotional support. It's interesting because, part of the process of the town is, people in this town is to have, the fear of what's going to happen, the unknown, right? How do you think the town managed that side of things, the moral support and coming together to look after each other?
I think that the council very early in the piece formed a not quite sure if it's proper title, I'll call it a communications team, where they were constantly putting communications out through various sources over the local ABC radio station and on the internet, like Facebook modes and the local paper and what have you. and there was a great flow of information all the time, which helped to try and stop the fears of some people. But I had friends and people I know that lived on the outside of the flood bank area, which was unprotected, and I went and helped some of them, and as much as anything, just be there and just listen to them, let them talk and just listen. And but then, some of the things I'd do and say. One family, an elderly couple, said, "Oh, just get our paperwork out and leave the house." I said, "No, we can do better than that," and just encourage them and let them. Because when something like you see a flood coming, it's very easy for people to sit back and just be overwhelmed by the whole situation. And if you can have somebody there guiding them to say, "Come on, let's do this," and there's one little bit of a story out of that. We'd got pretty much everything lifted. We lifted it all up in the house, all the furniture with put pallets in his house and stacked all the furniture up. And anyhow, they said, "Oh," the lady said, "Don't worry about that bit of gear." And I said, "No, it's important we get that up." It was to do with her hobby of sewing and what have you. And I said, and she said, "No, it doesn't matter." And she was quite upset. And I said, "It does matter." I said, "Might not matter now, but when it comes clean up time and you're going through all this stuff that's covered in mud and whatever, if you get flooded, that's when it matters, and for their mental health then." And so I had the opportunity to be able to do that for a few other people too, which was very, to me, rewarding, because being involved with the fire service and the SES, I've seen the aftermath of trauma to people, and I was able to assist there, which was I got a lot of satisfaction out of being able to offer that to them. So
that's awesome. Like, special of you to do it, and the team, SES and other services that come together at this time are just gold. How do you think the town went? Were they good? At dealing with this? Do you think the services work together? We've spoken about the council and the emergency committee.
Yes. Yeah, the services did work good, because obviously an event that big, the State Emergency Services, the leading agency to handle it. But we had the police assisting, the Country Fire Service, the CFS. They, because like the SES and CFS are volunteers. Volunteers are getting a bit thin on the ground these days, and so they come together as a group, and we had groups coming from all over the state, rostered, and they would come up here and do various tasks that needed to be done, and whatever. So that come together very well.
Oh, that's good news. Your friends and the people who were impacted, right? So people behind the wall, people on the other side of the wall who were dealing with the water itself. That's a strange situation, isn't it? Where some people are behind the wall and they're okay. How did that play out?
It was just what you got to remember. A lot of this, where the flood banks are, is off history, off the '56 flood, and houses have been built on the other side because they want a nice view of the waterfront and what have you. And it was. But a lot of the people that did live on the riverside of the flood banks and that built their own flood banks around their properties to protect them, and they had to go to that expense to get that done. And there's many people like that protected their own properties, and which was pretty difficult for them, because a big majority of the contractors, the earth moving contractors, they come from far and wide, to help. It was difficult to get a front end loader and a truck to come out and protect your property they were in high demand there. So, but it was really good to see. We had road trains going down the main street, 3 trailers on them, which normally wouldn't happen. And the general public, you could see them, they would give way to the road trains. Even when they had right of way, you would see them wave the trucks through. And there was a great atmosphere from a lot of the town people that were very positive to let the guys get on and get the job done. And it was really good. It was so many different contractors all working together that, the week before the floods were all working, they were all competition in business against each other, and all of a sudden they just gelled into one big group. It worked extremely well, and to my knowledge, for the huge amount of dirt carted and laid down and whatever, I believe there was no injury. So to run something that big, it was a pretty big thing to see that there was no injury. So everybody was very conscious and courteous of the big machinery moving around. So it was good to see.
Good story. It's a good news story to see a town respond like that. What do you think the town learned from this experience?
Everything since the 1956 flood was based on those levels and those flows. And most people have got an opinion of what a flood's going to do and whatever, be it misinformed, right or wrong. But I think the big thing from the town can take away from this flood is we didn't have any more relevant data since 1956. We've now got relevant data. And what's changed is things have been built on the floodplains, like causeways to make our road system better, and that all holds water up. So, and what we seen was a much higher level of water with a lot less flow than happened in, well, the water wasn't higher than 56, but we nearly got to the 56 level with a lot less flow, and that's because of the obstructions we've built downstream across the river plains. And so there's certainly a lot to be taken from that. So like the building codes, if you build a house here, it had to be built above the 1956 level, you had to build the ground up, whatever. Well, that's, we now have much more relevant data, which is certainly going to enhance further developments. We'll know what to expect. So yeah, there's a lot learned from it in that region for sure.
That's great. The interesting, your friends outside who were preparing for the water, and obviously the deluge came through, surprising everyone, right? Really, with its levels, and they would have, people, the cleanup is overwhelming, and then the loss of things. How did you see those people coping? It's been 2 years, and there are still people who are dealing with the outcomes, right?
Yes, a lot of them were in a lot of trouble. There's things like we've got a big problem up here with all the vineyards up here with the grapes. They use pine posts, and once they get a little bit old, they break, and there's no sort of central position to take all your broken posts. So many fruit blockers have just sort of stacked them on their property on the riverside of the flood banks, and I've seen them just float away because, and then they would float downstream a bit, but then other people that had fruit blocks downstream, all these posts floated in amongst their fruit blocks and made a terrible mess. Once I'd established the communication system for the council, they actually invited me to be part of the team to ride we had some little gators, little four-wheel drive side-by-side vehicles that they invited me to inspect the flood banks, be part of the team that inspected the flood banks. Each morning we went out just a bit after daylight and rode around and inspected the flood banks, and which allowed me to see who was getting really badly affected by, because when you're up on the flood bank, you were looking at both sides, and you could see all the rubbish floating into these people's properties, and it was a terrible mess that they've had to deal with, and that really broke some of them. It was just become such a big daunting mess to fix. It can become overwhelming for them, and it makes it very difficult for them, unfortunately.
Yeah. One of the things you notice, the adrenaline of an emergency and, coming together and all these, heroic efforts, people dig down and work together, as you said, described it beautifully, how everyone responded and was, contributing. After the event, the water goes down. There's nothing but mud. It's not spectacular, and that adrenaline is gone. How does a town or a community and people within that, how do they get through? How do they keep going? How do they recover and get back to something that they had before?
Yeah, well, it becomes a lot of hard work for some of them. Some of them weren't able to do that because they had their fruit blocks on the floodplains that got flooded and just ended up a heck of a mess. And they've just left it because the flood killed the vines, had not drowned them. And you can drive around there and they still see it there drowned. They've not recovered from it. Like I had another mate that had, he planted up a huge big area of pistachios, and other self-employed guy up here, and that was going to be his retirement, his superannuation retirement fund, and he lost a lot, and the trees all drowned and that, and I see him every now and then and have a chat with him, and but it's very difficult for those guys. They've really lost a lot, and most of that stuff like that's not insured, so they've lost it. It's terrible.
It's hard to watch, a town, suffer those wounds and see people struggle through that. Does it change a town? Do you think, does it make it stronger? Or is it something that people just accept and move on?
Yeah, I really don't know about that, because I only have seen the people that I know that were adversely affected. How the town goes generally over that, everybody that survived it with the council done a good job building the banks and kept the town dry, have just moved on and got on with life. But there's some out there that don't have the income anymore off their grapes or properties. It's I couldn't really comment on that. But when I look at what happened here, then you look at some of the films and the footage of downstream from here that didn't get quite prepared so well. I really feel for those people that lost everything. It's we used to hear some interesting stories when we were riding around the flood banks each morning, because the general public aren't allowed on flood banks, and we'd see the police each morning and stop and have a chat with them, and they quite often, because there was so much work here, they were coming from downstream towns too, and what they were telling us they see floating down the river was, like rainwater tanks and all sorts of things, and the damage further downstreams was horrific. So we were very lucky as a town. Luck, I guess, luck's maybe not the right word. We were very fortunate that the council prepared the town to withstand the flood. So
yeah. And of course, Riverland is a district as well, as Renmark is one end, and sets the agenda really for the river that goes through. That river also it's not just a challenge at flood time. It's also the lifeblood, the part of the the attraction of the place, right, and the beauty. What is Renmark to you, and what is the Riverland to you? Right?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Once you've got some Murray mud and Murray water in your veins, even if you leave it, you come back. Generally, it's a great place to live. It's very good atmosphere, very good environment, and some great scenery and whatever for the tourists. And of course, when we have a flood and the water starts to recede, the yabbies get going. So we had people coming from far and wide yabbying. Some really good, that attracted a lot of people up here, which, when they come in from other towns, other areas, it brings in dollars. They got to buy a bit of fuel and whatever, and it all helps in the recovery. So
there's always some form of silver lining, isn't there?
That's absolutely.
A good thing.
Yep. And it's been really good for the fish stocks in the river too. The after the flood, the river come alive with fishing. It's been very good. A lot of people are out catching cod. It's open season on cod. You've got to catch and release them, but lots of big cod being caught. So it's been really good for the river in that point of view, but not so good for the damage it's done. But it's the floods. The other thing that happens with the floods, because we've got a big paddle boat, houseboat industry up here, it shifted all the sandbars along the river, and we had quite a few houseboats running into them and having to back off of them, and sandbars that weren't there before are now, and whatever. So it really does clean the river up. It's a lot of flow. It's made it nice and fresh, and we were lucky here in Renmark is our the two big caravan parks here that are on the waterfront. They both had to build their own flood banks, but both protected their property. So as soon as the flood was over, they were able to get clients back in their accommodation and whatever. So, and that helped kick the town along too, because with the flood, and it stopped a lot of the tourism, and we weren't allowed on the water at all. That put a lot of people out of work. The cleaners at the caravan parks, for example, they were out of work. And so as soon as it dropped down, and because they'd saved their assets, they could open the parks up and people had work again. So that all helps part of the recovery system, which was good to see the town up and vibrant again and moving along.
Wow.
So,
fantastic. What do you hope happens from here?
I think with our planning, like the planning for future developments, take in consideration the new data they now have for estimating river flows and river levels. I think that's a really good thing to take from this flood, so that we try and prevent people having such big losses. Which is, to have the loss of your property is one thing, but the mental problems that can cause is a whole bigger problem. So, I hope that planning authorities take a lot from that. We now have relevant information. So, I certainly hope that's probably the single biggest thing, is to make it better to protect properties in the future.
From the outside, people look at the lifestyle and the challenges of living in a place like Renmark, remote, rural, challenging, marginal in some ways, right? With relying on the agriculture and tourism and so on, which can be quite challenging. Is it worth it? Is Renmark worth it? Is the Riverland worth it?
I think the lifestyle is definitely worth it. You need farmers for the people to eat, and we've got a lot of that here. We've got dry land farming a bit further out from Renmark, as you said. The whole Riverland's a region. We've got dry land farming, cereals and whatever, and then the huge almond developments here, wine grapes, oranges, and stone fruits and whatever. It's certainly a lot of challenges at the moment, because as we've got over the flood, the poor fruit blockers are now dealing with a fruit fly outbreak. So it's as you said, it certainly has its challenges here. But I think the lifestyle and the river, it's pretty relaxed and what have you. We have good services as far as medical support and that from Adelaide with the flying doctor service and what have you. So we're not all that far from the city without all the traffic and what have you. So yeah, that's a good spot to live for sure.
Yeah, no, amazing. The challenges of moving of rural Australia, being connected, getting the services, as you said, you're not far from the city, but sometimes can be a long way, even a couple of 100 kilometres, right? Why do you think, Australians go to the bush? What, like you've lived there all your life. Your ancestors were, literally cutting their way through the landscape,
through the bush.
Right? Yeah. Why do you think it calls Australians?
I think it's the lifestyle. It's reasonably relaxed. And you've got the river there. It's I think just a lifestyle thing that generally people here know pretty much each other and will lend a hand when it's needed. I go to my daughter's place down Adelaide and she doesn't even know her next door neighbours, and we're here. If something goes wrong, if we see a fire coming or something, you all go and see your neighbours and make sure they're right and whatever. And I think that's not only the Riverland. I think that's country lifestyle pretty much everywhere, So it's just a good, relaxing place to live.
So not just the river, it's the people on the river.
Yeah, well, the people make it, don't they? That's for sure. It's great. We've got some good schools here and good hospitals and whatever. So, like you say, we're not that far from Adelaide, really, from the bigger services when we need them. So it's and there's always a lot of development going up in here. They're slowly filling up the phone black spots, and out of the flood, we had a new front town wharf, has been just rebuilt and recently opened, which looks magnificent at the moment. And we're nearly got a bridge, one of the bridges to the entries. There's only 3 entries into Renmark, and one of those entries, like you said before, it's an island. One of the bridges got impacted pretty bad and couldn't be used, and that's well and truly on its way to being fixed, and which will give the people that live out Renmark West just quicker access into the town centre. So it's a lot's happened since the flood with the recovery system, and it's moving forward, and it'll be back to normal soon.
Well, it sounds amazing, and your story in particular, I love how you saw an issue and jumped on it. It's been wonderful to talk to you, Ivan. Thank you for your you so beautifully describing the place that you live, both in Challenge and the reason you stay there out and follow up. The flood hasn't washed you away from Renmark, right? So I really appreciate you sharing that story with us. Just on a final note, is there what would you like to say to the world, right? Is there something Renmark needs or the Riverland needs, or would you like to make an observation or share a thought about that with the rest of the country?
I think people like my age, I think at all times, but especially when there's a crisis on, I think we need to be able to lead in a positive manner with a positive attitude. I think we should lead by example, and I think we should demonstrate that most importantly to the younger generations. I'd really like to encourage the young ones. There's only recently we had the Australia Day breakfast here at the local council puts on, and they have a Citizen of the Year and whatever, and all well deserved. This year they also had a Young Citizen of the Year, a young lad, he's about 16, that's done a lot that was awarded, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure to see young ones coming up, volunteering and doing good things for the town. And it's, out of all of this, us older blokes need to lead by example and encourage the young ones. That's what I would like to see, is us mentor the younger generation as much as we can. They're our future. They're the ones who'll be deciding which old folks home they're going to put me in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if we're that lucky, right? If we look up. No, fantastic. Such a wise thing to say. And it's been wonderful to have your wisdom today, Ivan. Thank you so much for joining us, mate, and for sharing that. And we look forward to hearing nothing but good things as Renmark recovers. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Riverland Recovery Stories. If anything in this conversation has had a triggering effect, please seek support and reach out to someone who can help keep you safe. If you found this conversation interesting or helpful, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues so we can help more people with their recovery from natural disasters. To find out more about Kintsugi Heroes and our other projects, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au. Thank you to our production team, Kintsugi Heroes volunteers, and most importantly, the Riverland community for sharing their lived experience.